Okay, today we have Sir Brady Lang. He's going to be talking about like stop selling, stop serving, pricing your services. It's all about value-based pricing. I know some of it's kind of a recurring question that I hear a lot of. So it's going to be like a retainer model, four-step method, determine, marketing and budget, all of that good shenanigans. So Brady's been here for about 2 years now, and he's just moved into a different role. So really he's focusing on helping our community grow. So he runs a couple workshops. So Mr. Brady Lang, welcome to the community session.
So much, Colleen. Hey everybody,
Over to you.
How are we doing today?
There we go.
Can you hear me? Just want to double check. I'm going to share my screen as well. Let me know when you can see this.
We gotcha.
Okay, perfect. So hi everybody, Brady here with Vendasta. And today's session is inspired by Conquer Local Connect. So a couple of weeks ago, when we had Conquer Local Connect, I popped into a follow-up session with George Leith. And in this session, he really spoke about becoming that go-to expert for businesses. And really, it was all about, if I was to go off and start an agency, what would I do? And his strategy was a blend of a couple of different selling models. It was a little bit of product-led growth, a little bit of value selling, and product selling. But overall, it was consultative, and it put the customer first. And here with my time at Vendasta, my previous role, I've had the chance to work with a handful of new and emerging businesses. And I've often suggested a strategy that helps new businesses quickly grow into that expertise role. It's a way to stop pitching and really help them uncover the needs of a business first, and from there advise, because it's 2022 and people don't like to be sold. So becoming a consultative advisor. And of course, with Vendasta, you can provide the full digital marketing stack, and you're really able to own multiple categories for your client. So when you create a large impact and drive a lot of value for your clients, you're really able to get to the outcome that they want. It's going to open up an entirely different strategy for approaching how you price your different solutions. One sec, I'm just opening the chat here, making sure I can see that as well. Perfect. So I'm Brady, and I'm really excited. This session is really aimed for anybody who's struggling to price their products and services, or if you find yourself justifying invoices, even though it's the right solution, or you're struggling to establish realistic marketing budgets in the first place. Well, this session is for you, because at the end of the session, you'll have an understanding of value selling, a different selling model that will help you determine realistic marketing budgets, and I'll give you a framework to help you serve clients from that first interaction and empower you with solution freedom by leveraging a marketing retainer. So to start things off, I just want to cover a couple of different strategies. Now, I mentioned that George used a couple of different strategies in his, if I was to start an agency tomorrow, what would I do? These are the ones that he covered. Now, I want to talk to them, and I want to be really clear. They're all valid strategies, and they all have their places, pros and cons, and there are more models than the ones listed here. But it's valuable to have a set of different models that you can take on, adapt, pivot, connect with the different prospects that you're working with, so that you have different methods to reach the to really start with those clients. And so the first one that we'll look at today is the product selling model. Now, we see this a lot, and I see this a lot when new agencies come in and they start working with me. Often they're focused on the product. It's all about the product. It's selling product. And they spend a lot of their sales process sitting here in the product. They're giving out the specs, or they're just saying, this is the outcome for using the product. And then they'll throw out a price, which hopefully has that value to that customer. And hopefully that actually covers the customer's goals and their objectives. Now, often I find that as they're just starting out in the sales process, this is not a great strategy, unless they're just giving off one-off products. Now, as full stack marketing agencies, typically you're going to be rolling out packages of solutions. And so I often advise on the value selling model, where you put the customer first, determine their values and goals, and then work that out to find the price. And really, the product is an afterthought. It's what we're going to use afterwards. We work backwards from the customer's values to then pick the right solution set of products. So we're not going in with anything premeditated or determined with this strategy. And then there's also product-led growth, which, similar to the product selling model, starts with product, but it cuts out the cost, the price, just starts with value. And when that customer uses it and they see the value, well, they are then prompted to upgrade. Now, we're not going to touch on that much, but I just wanted to go over these different models, and we're going to go into some more detail. Now, I think it'd be a really good place to start with the product selling model, because I think I can lay out a scenario that you may have seen or felt yourself. So here's an example situation. I just want us to imagine a scenario, right? So let's say that we have Jim salesperson. So he's got a rockstar client that loved the work that's been done for her business. And so she refers somebody in her network to Jim salesperson, and that's Taylor, business person. Well, Jim's given some notice by his original client, and so he creates a snapshot report on Taylor's business. With that snapshot report, he notices, oh, they aren't active on social, and they have a reputation that needs work. So Taylor could call Jim and say, hey, Jim, I need a website and heard you're the best. So Taylor's coming to Jim for something specific, but based on what he saw in the snapshot report, he knows he wants to ultimately upsell the other things that he can provide. And so, oh, that's absolutely great. Jim might respond, this is absolutely great. I can absolutely help you with a new website, but are you also open to an evaluation of your online presence? And Taylor might say, sure, I might be. What would that entail? And so from there, Jim might start pitching right into the full solution set. So, hey, Taylor, I looked into your business before the call, and I can tell you've been neglecting your reputation. Your customers get turned off even before they hit your website. And you've got a 3.6 rating on Google, so nobody's clicking through to that website. And no social posts makes me think that this business is dead. Heavy hitting question for you. Are you scared of putting yourself out there because of your poor reputation? Now, definitely forward and aggressive, but Jim's laying it out on the line. And so with that, Taylor might say, well, that's not quite it. And Jim might continue going forward. Well, this is a reputation problem. Your audience isn't seeing your business for what it is, and we can help. But we have regular customers who love us. Yeah, for now, but what about in a few years? With a bad reputation, you might be okay for a little bit, but how can you ensure they actually stick around? We have an all-star team that can manage your social and reputation while asking for more reviews. I can put this all together with you. Website, typically run you $1,500 alone, but we'll bundle in our team and charge you $2,150 all in. How's that sound? So sometimes this is what I see new businesses doing. They will come out with this very aggressive and premeditated solution set, and they drive it right down the business. They're just looking to offer the entire solution set, and they're not asking why or doing any discovery. They already know why. They're using the snapshot report with the different products and services that will cover those holes. But I think that comes off as pretty aggressive. And so if we put ourselves in the shoes of somebody like Taylor, business person, how would this make you feel? And drop it in the chat, because I think that this is a really good exercise. Jim has this perfect solution for Taylor, but presentation may have been slightly weak, but overall it was all about Jim and Jim's solution and had nothing to do with Taylor's business. And so when I look at this, Jim did his homework. He had good insights into deeper issues, and recognized that issues were larger than just a website, and was even thinking of the customer journey. Who's going to get to a website that you're coming to me for if there are other holes that you haven't addressed? But I also think he makes a lot of assumptions here. He doesn't really address the original concern. And through that process, he gets no additional clarity about the problems at hand, thinks more about his own solution than whether it was the right solution, and completely hinged on product features to address a problem without any real understanding. And so I often run this scenario by my partners and ask, would you purchase from somebody like Jim salesperson? And I also feel like that could damage a relationship with a referring client. And so when the product selling model is done poorly, there's a large focus on product. I would say 90% of the time was spent here. And it's a specific solution to a problem that they don't understand. Instead of learning more about the issues, the customer and the value was merely an afterthought. Instead, it was this product and it's perfect for the situation. Here's a price, and will that work for you? In situations like this, especially where somebody's referred to you, their walls are still going to be up. They're coming to you, they've heard you're great, but you're incentivized to sell them more things. And I always tell my partners, if you're telling, you're selling. People don't like to be sold. And I think a really apt description here by George Leith back at the Conquer Local follow-up session was when he was describing the bad salesperson, somebody who had that premeditated perfect solution before they even understood the overall context. George said something like, amateurs prescribe and experts diagnosed. And he also went deeper and said, okay, if you went to a doctor and told them you've been having trouble sleeping, what would they do? They wouldn't just send you off with the solution, they'd start asking questions. And these questions would rule out issues. How many nights per week are you having trouble sleeping? Has there been a sudden change in your sleeping habits? What medications are you on? And so I think this is a good time for reflection. In your process, do you prescribe solutions or do you ask the questions to diagnose? And if not, what does diagnosing actual issues look like? So for a lot of my partners, I push them towards value selling. And this is really where we take the customer first. So I want to replay that scenario, but instead, let's approach it from a place of value-based selling. So I'm going to rewind here, and we're going to restart that conversation. So we've got Jim salesperson, Taylor business person, who's been referred to Jim. And Taylor might call Jim and say, hey, Jim, I need a new website. Heard you're the best. Well, Taylor, I appreciate that you're considering me for a website, but I'm curious, why are you looking for a new website? And maybe she'll tell us something like, oh, she recently bought a business as a fixer-upper, and she needs a refresh to indicate they have new ownership. And why do you feel that you have a need to indicate new ownership? And so she might say that the last owners weren't really caring for their online presence at all, and they want to distance themselves from the poor reputation of the past, and a fresh look on that website would help. How do you feel that's holding you back? Might be the next question. And there's a lot of smaller, maybe she says there's a lot of smaller competitors in the area and they're simply outperforming them. And with winter ending soon, people are looking to get their tires changed soon. So we're kind of picking up on a couple of details. We start to understand that the original concern isn't actually about a website at all. It's something that's totally tangential and maybe a bigger problem. They've bought into a business that really needs to be addressed from the ground up when it comes to how they're perceived. They also have a messaging problem. How do they communicate that they're under new management? Well, here, what I always suggest is when you've got all of these different problems, you boil it down and reiterate it. So maybe you're struggling with brand perception, increasing the competition, and you feel unprepared for the busiest season of the year. So in this scenario, Taylor business person owns a tire shop And in Canada, we have to switch our tires. We've got winter and summer tires. So there's a time and a season where this is really heavy, right? For the 2-3 months that we're actually warm. So we kind of have the main concerns. And so we could check in and say, Taylor, I'd say that this isn't a website issue at all. This is a marketing issue because we're struggling with brand perception. There is a fear with increasing competition, and you're already behind. Would you agree on this? And she agrees. So let's pause and look at this again. So as Taylor business person, how do you feel? How is this different? We're definitely doing a lot more discovery. We're asking a lot more questions. But for Taylor, how would she feel? And as Jim, what advantages do you have by going through this line of questioning? Before, you kind of already knew the solution. But here you can really understand not only a solution, but maybe more. And now you have a timeline, and now you have something to work with. So typically, discoveries uncover a lot more, and they're a lot more nuanced, and they take more time. But the key here, the difference, has been asking questions: why, how, where. Here, you're ruling things out so you can diagnose issues. And then we can go on to creating a proper treatment plan with prescribed solutions. So instead of coming in and prescribing solutions immediately with no understanding of the actual problem to create an appropriate treatment plan, we're involving the client because they know the most about their business. So when we ask questions, we can rule things out to diagnose the actual issues. And the issue wasn't a website. It was an overall messaging issue. It was perhaps that they need to get ready on the market quickly, and they need to address the fact that smaller competitors are coming in. So we have a lot more information. And this is really about discovery. But I think it's really important to summarize those key points, reframe it, and make sure that we agree, because now we agree on a diagnosis. We can start moving on. And this takes us to the framework for value selling. So we've first understood the true problem at hand, and we've established expertise because we didn't just take things at face value. And we've also determined the desired future state. We know that they aren't happy with where they're at. They bought this business as a fixer-upper. They're struggling to do so because they haven't taken action on things already, and it's time sensitive. So they want to be in a competitive state quickly. So here's where we can dig in a little bit further. And we'd ask questions like, what does success look like? How are we going to measure that success? And then we can work backwards from here to determine a realistic marketing budget. So a question you might ask is, okay, I'd like to understand more. Ideally, where would you like to be at the end of the year? Well, I think it would be really great if we could get 50% more booked services. Okay, so on average, how many services do you have booked every month? And she could say something like 200 services monthly, but we're seeing this number slip over time. Okay, so about 100 more services, and what's your profit on each? Well, it's $75 after labor, but we store them, and so we get their business next season. So I'd say about $150 after labor and storage. So we start to multiply these things. We want 100 more services, and it's worth $150 profit after the labor and storage. So if we were able to do what you're asking, that would be an extra $15,000 per month. This is what success looks like. So if we were able to get to that point, 100 more services for $5,000 a month, that would be a huge win, right? And sometimes I see an objection come up here. Yeah, but I only plan to spend $1,200 a month. So at this point, we're working backwards. We know what the value of a solution is to this customer, and we know what they actually want. No matter what, you are going to be facing with anyways. So this client may have only been planning to spend a fraction of that, $1,200 a month. But you think you can get it done for $5,000 a month, and they would get $15,000 a month if you were to accomplish it. So no matter what, you're going up against the expectations of that client. And this will help us frame it. Well, I was only looking to spend $1,200 a month. Okay, we could try that, but we have to shrink the goal because that's not very realistic. And maybe they don't want to do that, or maybe they do. But this is really valuable because by unrooting the goals, we can understand the value, and we can use that value to price backwards. This is a client that wouldn't spend over $1,200 a month. And now we're actually looking at something that's more realistic, $5,000 a month. And regardless of budget, you've had to hit these unrealistic expectations given a restrained budget. This was never going to work. But now there's a real shot because we can create a solution set that might be able to get those additional services. So we can scale this up and down accordingly. And by working backwards, we're using their actual goals. So if we're looking at what's different, Jim here in this sales process had good insights into deeper issues, but didn't take it at face value. Recognized issues were larger than the website, just like last time, but asked questions to gain real clarity on the issues. It also builds trust. And then diagnosing the issue, getting confirmation so that a treatment plan can be prescribed and a solution set at a price point that's actually reasonable to the goals. And I think that this is really vital because while we haven't even talked about the solutions yet, we've determined, okay, this is a realistic budget. We could get this done. And is this something you're open to? And I think if you just math it out, it makes a lot of sense. So again, we reiterated the actual problem, got confirmation and buy-in. We established that desired future state. They wanted to be a top competitor in their area. We looked at what success looked like, having more services in time for the busiest season of the year, or being positioned to capture more of those service bookings. And how could we measure success? Well, 50% more services, which is your goal, that would be a difference of $10,000 per month. And you can anchor from that position, work backwards, and as long as it's some reasonable fraction of the profit for them doing this, well, now you're not just working with a $1,200 marketing budget, you're working with something realistic. And so when we look at this again, that conversation, it doesn't even focus on the individual products or the solution set. It's really up to you to determine it to be realistic. And I'd say you wrap this up by sending over a proposal, including strategy and execution. But in this initial conversation, we can get buy-in on the value of what they're doing at a price point that makes sense. And so we spent our time focusing on the customer and their overall goals and needs. From that, we distilled the value of solving the problems that they came to us with. The price is a fraction of that value. And the overall wholesale and product set is kind of an afterthought. And so it reverses its model on its head. When we go product-based selling, well, we're going the opposite way, where the value and the customer are an afterthought. We're selling a product to hit a need. Do you want this? Sure, let's try it. Here, we've worked the other way around. And I think that this is a model that I love. I think it's really important to diversify the different selling strategies that you have. I think it's great to try it out and embrace it and see what works for you and your clients. Take what works, discard what doesn't. This is just another tool in your toolbox. But being able to use this or getting that firsthand experience is very vital. And I find that this is a way for especially smaller agencies who are getting their first customers to grow into that expertise role, because they can work with this model to obtain a realistic marketing budget, and they just got to make it work. And as a Vendasta partner, you have access to products and services that make it work. The only thing is getting the right solutions and delivering it. And this is why I'm a really big fan of a marketing retainer model. I think this lends well to value selling because typically you've just got one line item on an invoice, it's paid monthly. And so you can have a fluid budget. Instead of selling a couple of different solutions that are all individually laid out that can be picked apart on an invoice, yeah, well, we don't really need that. You're agreeing on the outcome, on the actual goals of the client. And whatever it takes for you to get there, you'll do. And so you can move that budget around. You can run experiments. You can grow in your understanding on how these solutions will actually impact the client. And of course, you're typically going to be more involved, but you have time as a newer agency to do this. And you can also charge for higher margin. But as you're growing, this is a really great way to approach the sales cycles. And you have to constantly reevaluate to determine the largest impact drivers. Over time, you can grow into that expert. You could spend less time towards this, but still deliver that same model. And so my original goals here was to have an understanding of value-based selling. So, and to have a framework to use it. And if you go through with the questions in that order, you'll be able to work through and determine a realistic budget for your client's goals or shrink their goals. And that's fine too, but at least you're not going up against something invisible that is just going to churn eventually and you don't really know why. So this is a great way for us to all get on the same playing field, and it's a great model. Now, I wanted to open this up to comments or questions. This takes me to the end of the presentation. And yes, Colleen, I can send out the slides through the community afterwards.
Awesome. Thanks, Brady. Yeah, we'll post it in the community forum for everyone to pick it up. Okay, questions, comments, concerns, feedback for Brady?
Yeah, I have a question.
Let's hear it, Ed.
In the model, yeah, in the model, I understood the words, et cetera, because I've always done consultative selling. But I didn't understand in the lines where it was price and then cost. So what do those mean? So price, I know is what the customer pays, or it's what you charge. But what's the cost? Yeah, could you relate those? I'm not sure which cost you're talking about and how that fits in that.
I also find this the probably most confusing section here. So we're talking about price. That's your retail price. Cost is the amount of wholesale. This is really more for you. But to achieve those goals, you're going to need to allocate some ratio of wholesale that will purchase the actual products. Again, I think kind of an afterthought. We're not going in there knowing what we're going to sell. But yes, this lends very well to the consultative selling approach.
Okay. So really where it's, if I were to reword that, I would say the price and cost relationship is really, you're talking about your own margin, right?
Yeah, your markup. That'd be another way to look at it.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to assume that. I thought maybe I was missing something. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Ed.
Who's next? You can put up your hand or you can put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Maybe not. I'll just start picking on you because I know you all have questions and sometimes you're not comfortable unmuting. So people like, I'm not a bully. I'm not a bully.
I have a question.
There we go. Let's hear it.
Well, not to be a pessimist at all, but how would you specifically deal with a situation where, given the example you gave, that the growth of business is less than the $5,000 that they're paying for additional services? I'm just asking this for future knowledge of how best to address these types of situations.
I really appreciate that question. So in this scenario, we have a business that's looking to grow. They have deeper pockets because they're buying businesses and they want to fix it up quick. You might have something that's a little bit, more realistic. But the biggest thing is you're understanding my goals are to grow this in my business, and maybe it's a gym. So I want to sell 10 memberships every single month, 10 more, because that's going to give us a lot to work on. We can get that next employee. Okay, well, what's the lifetime value of your customers? Well, they're $50 a month. Yeah, but how long do they stay with you? We have 1-year contracts. Okay, so $600 each, and you need 10 every single month, so that's $6,000 a month. Now, we can put together a strategy to get us closer to that goal, and we can hinge backwards, right? So we have this number, this Northern Star that we can work backwards from. That could be $1,200 a month, that could be $1,800. And as long as it's a reasonable amount of uptake for the client, typically we can work this out. Now, sometimes it will be, okay, well, I'm trying to grow my business to get $1,000 extra a month. Well, then we can work backwards from there. Well, here, I think we can grow your fundamentals. And with a set of DIY products and this one fulfilled product at $500 a month, we can probably get there. And no matter what, this is giving us a realistic goal that we can either hit or not hit to work off of. Does that answer your question, or what other questions does it bring forth for you?
Actually, that does. Yeah, I have a better idea of you can adjust the goals as the months go by, I would imagine.
Yeah, and this is something where you're typically going to be more involved in the process, so your margins will typically be higher, but you're constantly reevaluating this strategy. And this is what I love about it for newer agencies, because they're forced to grow into this expertise. They're forced to try different solutions, and they're forced to just make it work, right? Just make it work. And I feel that people rise to the challenge when this happens.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
I have a question.
Let's hear it,
Hey,
Tim.
Tim.
So this is going to be a difficult one to answer, but in your experience, do you have a recommended markup or margin against a certain cost of goods that you would recommend using that's standard?
So I think that depends on the overall solution set. SEO, you typically have higher margins than you might with ads. But sometimes driving ads will make the most sense, right? Sometimes an SEO solution. I don't have a fixed number. I have some decent rules of thumb, but I think when you're taking that holistic package, it's going to be based on the solution. So while you're pricing on value, your wholesale might fluctuate as well. There's some fluidity in it. Magic number that we use here, and I think makes a lot of sense, where we see a maximization of retention across multiple products, 40% tends to be really healthy. If I had to give you an answer, we try to keep that at 40%. Since you're putting your time into it, you could either charge for your time individually, or maybe you bump that up to 65%.
So if it costs you $10, you would recommend selling it for 14?
Or 16, yeah, exactly.
Okay, and would you say that those numbers are consistent with what's in the online store, with the MSRP and the wholesale?
So yes, what I would say is those numbers, the ratio of those numbers, I think is totally on the nose, right? And I really look at that. However, I would say that if you are in a very dense area where there are other full stack digital marketing agencies, so let's say New York, right? Okay, there's a lot of competition on the market. You're fighting on price a lot of the time. And so you need to stick to those MSRP numbers, the recommended retail numbers. However, we've seen a lot of success when we have partners that are in smaller areas. They are the only, or maybe one of the few, full stack digital marketing agencies. And so they can charge more. There's more, they can be more liberal with it because they're solving a lot of problems all in one. When you come to it with this approach, you might be the only person or the only agency doing this approach, so you can charge handsomely.
Well, that's not really true, because with the digital age, the competition is everywhere. It's online everywhere, right? So like, yeah, you may be one of a very few agencies in the area, but they do have options to deal with anyone in the world. I just experienced losing a big client to a customer out of the US, a vendor out of the US, and I lost it due to price. So it's interesting to me to try to nail down markup, margin, and what makes it worth it for all the work that has to be done to do something correct and to really manage it well. There has to be a certain amount of money that has to be made. Otherwise, it's just like a lot of pain for not a lot of return.
Can I say something though? I mean, this is just a basic going back to college years studying marketing. But one of the things that we were always told is never compete on pricing because you'll always fail. You know, we see it in airlines that compete on prices, but they're doing it for a specific reason to get attention over the short term, not over the long term, because they can't make money doing that. So getting into a situation where you're competing on prices, because, you know, and I hear you about the competition and sometimes you have to, but it seems a little dangerous for a business to even pull that in. I like this idea of value-based selling because of that. Like, is there anything else that you could share with us a little bit deeper on things to up level ourselves, you know, because we can't compete on pricing. So what things should we get our heads around? I think that would be a good share.
I would say that with a model like value-based pricing, you've come through and you've done a deep discovery into their needs. If you're hitting their goals, there's no need to reevaluate, right? I don't think they're constantly going to be searching. And yes, competition can swoop and pick you up on price, but I mean, that risk is always out there. I feel that the clients that really respond well to value-based pricing tend to want to stick with somebody that's really focused on them. And also what you bring to the table as an expert in communication and transparency might not be replicatable by other bigger organizations, or maybe even other organizations in general. So they might beat you on price, but they suck at communicating. They don't actually have a good full stack, and you can win that back. It's not that that's always over, right? Sometimes they just get sold by somebody really slick. But I would still keep that door open and maybe look for another opportunity, or they'll come back to you. And
Okay,
I have a comment. So I've always done consultative selling, and that's been more than half of my professional career. And I've sold software and hardware, but basically the model I use is consultative selling, of which value-based selling is a huge component. But there's other components in it, and I think Brady was alluding to it. So the trust of the customer in you, the reliability of what you sell, their history with you, your knowledge of what their personal goals are, not just the goals of their company, but their personal goals, because they want to keep their jobs or they own the company. Either way, they've got personal goals. And if you approach all of those, then that's what I call consultative selling. So the other thing is that there's another component in there, and that's the accounting component or the financial component. When you look at your pricing, say suggested price, whatever, if you use Vendasta suggested price or you change it, then you've got your costs. You really have to figure out what your minimum margins are. It's that simple for that package or that price. Once you know that minimum price, you know you've hit your rock bottom, and anything else below that would be a sacrifice and a burden on your company. So at some point you may lose a sale, but the main thing you're going for, I think, is what I'm going for, which is to make a consistent reasonable margin and to retain customers, because the more customers I retain, I don't have to spend the time to sell them. So anyway, that's my personal view.
okay, we have Elijah asked a couple questions. Based on your experience, what is your suggested percentage markup from Vendasta wholesale price, especially the toolkits? Do you think posting the digital toolkits price on his website is okay? Or should he change it to contact sales so he can change the pricing based on the client's budget?
Well, good question. What I would say is you can absolutely have your tools out there on your website. I think this really depends on your approach. So if you find a client where the toolkit would address all their needs and their DIY, and you know that's it, you might have more freedom to mark that up more. In a situation where we have a store, that is more of a product-based selling approach, where the product is being discovered and looking at the price, is it valuable enough to me, the customer? And the customer is the one who's focusing on this. So two different strategies, two different clients. And I think that while product-based selling at a DIY level makes a lot of sense, as soon as we start to add in those fulfilled services, that's where contact sales starts to make a lot more sense. And can we actually solve those problems for this budget? And so I feel like when we own more of that customer journey, value-based selling can come in because we're addressing more parts. There's lots of moving pieces. I see, perfect. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat box there. I see a plus from Daryl. Does that answer
Elijah,
the
did
question?
that help? Elijah, does that help? Oh, he says thanks.
Says thanks.
Perfect.
Perfect. We have 5 minutes left. Again, it will be posted, the whole recording will be posted in the community session afterwards by end of day Monday. We'll share Brady's slides in the forums right after. But does anyone else have any questions right now? We have 5 minutes left. I'm going to share this link to the survey one more time because I want to hear from all of you. There's like 50 people on this call and you're also important to me. I care what you think. Fill out that survey. Okay, next question.
Looking at Daryl's question here, it sounds like you're not, oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. So I'm relatively new to this training and or to any of the trainings. So I've been taking the lessons, etc. But a question I have is in the business app that the customer sees, do they see your pricing? I thought I recall that they do. Is that correct? So that's my question.
Quick answer to that, Ed, it can be either way there. So they can see it, or you can have it so they have to contact you for more details.
Oh, they cannot see it?
Your choice.
Oh, okay. So you can do that for each client that you give a business app.
Gotcha. No, I now see the answer there. So what I would say is you can have the store in their business app, but you can individually change the settings so that they wouldn't see the store on a client level. So if you do have that custom pricing, maybe do that. I would suggest if you're doing a mix of product-based selling and value-based selling, that maybe it's all contact sales to get a rate card for somebody who's more of a fit for product, but for somebody who's value, they contact sales to have those discussions, consultations, and leverage your expertise, which actually brings me into Daryl's question a bit here, where sounds like you're recommending not setting a standard price for a given product. I think that the suggested retail rates that Vendasta provides, very competitive. If you live in a smaller area, you can typically charge more because you're unique. Uniqueness can be one of the things you bring to the table that drives margin. It can also be transparency. It can be the amount of attention you put on that individual account. There are lots of variables here of what you and your expertise brings to the table that will change the margins that you can charge.
Okay, team, one more question. And then I'm going to send you off into the ether. Okay, one other thing, if I'm gonna take this down, no community session next week. No community session next week. No community session next week. It is Good Friday. Everyone hang out with the Easter Bunny, eat chocolate and whatnot, but we have time for one more question. Speak now, forever hold your peace. We do have Brady in the community all the time, so you can always hit him up, ask him all your questions. He's a pretty smart guy. Anybody else?
Yeah, Brady, how do you fight discounters, prospects who are always thinking they can get a discount?
That's a good thought. I think that the retainer-based model works really well here. And I would also say that when it's based on value, the discount is implied. You get this much, I'll charge you this much. Heck of a deal, right? Well, could I get it for $800 less? Let's shrink your goal, right? Frankly, that's where we're at. And at that point, they're now, oh, I don't want to shrink my goal. Well, can I actually do that? And I need to sustain my business. I need to be here, because if I disappear because I can't operate my business, that doesn't make sense for either of us. And so this is a price that makes sure that we keep the lights on and we can keep delivering this service. I would push back against it like that. Shrink their goals. And when you do value-based selling, you have their goal in mind. You know exactly what it is. So if they want a discount, they're discounting the results.
Thank you, Brady, for coming in and giving a talk. Goodbye, Mr. Brett Clarenbeck. Catch him next week in Water Cooler. We're gonna kind of miss you, I guess. Yeah, we're gonna kind of miss you.
Guys as well. Kind of miss you guys.
Thank you all for joining today. I appreciate you coming and spending your time with us. I'm also going to send this community session feedback form in our email on Monday, and I'm going to post it in the community as well. I really want your feedback. This is not just for me. This is only for you. My job is here to support you. So thank you, Brady, for coming in and sharing your wisdom. Everyone have a safe and happy weekend, and I will see you in 2 weeks. No session next week. Take care, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
You well.